In Excel 2003 and earlier versions, when we had menus and toolbars under the menus, we had the File menu that gave us all the file management tasks. And then in 2007, Microsoft replaced it with the round Office button in the upper left corner, and a lot of people had no idea what it was or that they could even go and save and open their files there. So in 2010, and this is in the other Office applications as well as Excel, we now have the File tab, and that's also called Backstage View. So I'll click on the File tab. That brings us into Backstage View, and I'll use this term synonymously here. You can see all the familiar things that you would have had under the File menu, like saving and opening and closing and so on. We also have our recent files list, which I'll talk about in a second. But let's say you didn't even know about the File tab, or you didn't even know anything about the Office button in the previous versions. I'm just going to go back here to Home. If you know what some of the shortcuts are, those things aren't really necessary. If, for example, Open begins with the letter O, so you could press Control-O to open, or Control-S to save. Or you might know that, let's say, Control-F4 is the same as clicking on this button here to close, or F12 is the same thing as the Save As dialog box. I'll just escape out of here. So if you know what some of those are, and I recommend that you learn at least some handy ones, you don't have to depend on going to the File tab over and over again. But let's go back here. And over here in the Info tab, we can see permissions. This used to be in a different place. Prepare for sharing is new, versions is new. But I really want to show you here the recent files list. So let me go here to recent files list. In the 2003 version, it gave you a maximum of 9 files showing up. In 2007 and 2010, we could have up to 50 files showing up here in the list. But what's new in 2010 is we have recent places, so we could go into an entire folder. In 2007, we had these push pins, and obviously we still have them here, but they've changed a little bit. Right now, these are all gray, none of them are pushed in. But let's say this Backstage file here, I click that pin. Not only does it get pinned to the list, but you see it also gets pushed up to the top. Or let's say this printing document, I'll click that. So it gets pinned, and all of the pinned files go up to the top. Let's say I decide that, well, maybe I don't need this to be pinned anymore. I don't care if it scrolls off or not, and I click and remove it. It just goes back down towards the bottom. So that's kind of a nice feature, that anything that's pinned will stay on the list until you unpin it, and the pinned files stay up to the top. Well, what if there's a file here that you don't want here at all? And this is something also new to this version. Here's a confidential spreadsheet that I had open. Well, I'm going to right-click and choose Remove from List. So now you see that confidential file is no longer in the list. Now that doesn't delete it from your hard drive. That file is still there, and anyone with access to your hard drive is still going to be able to go in and access it, but at least nobody can come in here to the recent file list and see that you had that file open and editing. So now that we see where some of our familiar commands are located in this new version of Excel, I'm going to come back and revisit Backstage View throughout the chapter so you can see some of the other features that are in here. But before we do that, we need to understand how to deal with file compatibility between this new version and the previous ones.